Thank you very much. I'm Garland Scott. As Lori said, I'm the outreach manager now and outreach manager for support and outreach for the GVI in Jacksonville, Florida. Today we have with us Debie M. Coble, Erika Mendelsohn, Reverend Maurice Winley, Keith L. Bennett, and Harold Dimbo. Did I say your name right, Harold?
Yes, you did.
Okay, and we have a very good panel today. We're going to be dealing with outreach and support, meeting those at-risk people where they are at. The first thing I want to do, yesterday, Mr. Travis ended his session, his morning panel, with a question, and I wanted to start with a question because a lot of times people don't understand in this particular field. I do believe, and I've been doing it for 30 years, this August 19th, 30 years, the same thing. That's why I believe faithfulness is God finding you where he left you. You have to be connected to it, and it has to be something that drives you, a hope, a heart. What I like to say, it's a natural ability, and the only way to explain natural is a fish. A fish doesn't go to swim school. He simply gets to water. When he finds the water, he swims. Take him out of the water, he dies. And what most of us in this room, our water is outreach and support because we're here and we swim and we thrive in it. But something keeps that heart pumping. So I want to know, what is the hope that keeps you getting up each morning from doing this job? And we'll start with Ms. Coble.
So probably it goes back to in 2013 when we got the call. Our community foundation was kind of heading up the organizing of the group violence initiative, and we get a call from the vice president asking us if Goodwill would be the lead social service agency. And so we had been quietly doing what we do for years, and so to get that recognition of our ability to do so was pretty exciting. And I was the vice president at that point in time. And so we accepted it, but it was really then down the road, and these are the things that remind me every day of how important this work was. So I was giving the chief of police and the officer that was part of the GVI statistics a tour of Goodwill. And there were two young men about 17 years of age that were standing at their case manager's door. And one of them came up and hugged the officer and made the comment, who would have ever thought that two rival gang members would be becoming best friends? And this wasn't by accident that this happened. So Isaac and Dominic were working with these two young men that were just at odds with each other. And they took a boat out on Lake Michigan, and they told him, either you're coming back as friends or only one of you is coming back. Now, I have to tell you, by this time, I'm the president, okay? And I have to tell you, everything is fearing in me about, oh my goodness, what have we done, right? But it was probably, I knew what we were doing was good and was important, but as we've continued to have those stories and those moments, the significance of what we are doing in changing lives and helping young men to leave a life that's either going to get them in prison or get them shot is incredibly humbling, and we are just very honored to be in this space and get to do this.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So I am very hopeful about this work, especially right now, because I'm incredibly proud to be working for the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services as they implement a very untraditional program and really new approach to outreach work in the community. And I think that gives us all a lot of hope about institutions sort of rethinking how they can prevent crime and not be just reactive in the end, as well as the Office of Victim Services, who has really recognized that there's a group of young men of color specifically who are not receiving victim services and to the extent that they should be, and has really taken measures to to fix that and to create programs that will allow those services to be given to the people that deserve them.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maurice Winley. I'm a third-generation minister that has been serving youth families and community in Harlem since 1942. And so the hope, I mean, you have to have hope when you approach this work. I find that it's very easy to get disillusioned when you're kind of seeing cycles of violence, generations of violence. But in terms of the hope, I had the opportunity of serving as the Executive Director of Living Redemption Youth Opportunity Hub, which is part of the Criminal Justice Investment Initiative, where District Attorney invested a significant amount of monies into evidence-based, community-driven models. And so the hope is that that the community is put into a position. Our mission is to save lives and heal communities one relationship at a time, to really see communities receive the deep healing that's needed, that we address the legacy of historical trauma that has been impacting our communities, that we dismantle the systems, the institutions, and the processes that are sustaining that trauma, and at the same time, to really see children and our youth not live in fear, not live with, I would say, a ghetto nihilism, to have a hope and a future, and just to see true transformation and healing take place in a tangible way. And so we're grateful to be here and looking forward to the dialogue.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, my story go back a while back now, about 30 years. My father challenged me about sitting around always talking about things I don't like and not doing anything about it. So one of the things that I decided to do, because I see what was going on in my neighborhood, was to become a police officer. And you can imagine the challenge I went through. A guy that's from the neighborhood, played football, basketball, and I put on a blue uniform. You know, so I want everybody to know that it's not the uniform, it's the person inside. Because at the end, it's all about loving one another. And because of that, I had an opportunity to work with different organizations, and I got a chance to work in the community. And I'm going to tell you just a short, quick story, and that's going to sum up why I do what I do. When I was a police officer, I did a lot of work in the community and always gave back, and I helped a lot of people, and everybody don't have to go to jail. Police are there to protect and serve. And for some reason, it seemed to be changing. So I wanted to make sure that I helped the young black males. I helped the people of color to try to get them to where I know they should be, not what the media say they should be. So one particular day, I was actually injured, and I was going over my mother's house, who still lived on Stratford Avenue, which is a high crime area, when a person pulled out a gun and started to shoot at me. And I had nowhere to go. I thought this was going to be the end of my life. Someone in the community, a couple of people in the community pull out a gun and start shooting at him to stop shooting at me, because they respect who I was and what I was doing in the neighborhood. And I don't need to say any more why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I'm alive.
Good morning, everyone. Keith Bennett from the great city of Detroit. I deal with hope because I've seen the alternative, and it doesn't feel good. And I know how it felt in my life, and I wouldn't want anybody else to feel hopeless. And so I get up every morning with a purpose, makes me smile, and I realize that I need to translate that to other people. Everybody should really have an opportunity to wake up every morning with a smile, with hope, and understand what God's grace is. And so that drives me. What also drives me is the fact that I just realized that a lot of times it's not what they know, it's what they don't know. A lot of people are living, not living, but they're surviving, and we need to teach people how to live. And so that's where it is.
Well, I'm Garland. My hope and my passion is I'm from New York City. I was born in the Bronx and moved to Brooklyn, where I lived most of my life at, an area called Flatbush. And I got involved with posses, groups. We didn't have gangs then in the Afro-American areas. It was the 40s against the 50s or 60s, whatever. And I was pretty much the leader of a lot. I went to a high school called Erasmus Hall High School, and I started a lot of trouble, and I became the enforcer when you didn't pay your crack money, you seen me. I had a nice, catchy street name. I was Big Buck, who didn't give a, you know, the rest. And and I did that at the age of 12. I started at the age of 12, and people, oh man, they went into this life of crime. No, my mother was a New York City police officer at the 76th Precinct. I went to a school called Fort Hamilton High School to be a pharmacist, and I got beat up in a race riot because my skin was just a little darker. So I had to go to my zone school, which was Erasmus, and I decided I wasn't getting beat up again. So since I learned how to beat up really good, they made me the beater-upper. And that's how it happened. But there's always somebody bigger, and somebody put a contract on my life to kill me. So I told my mom, and she had me relocated to another city, which was Georgia, outside of Jacksonville, Florida. I went there, and boy, I can work this city, little country area. Boy, I can be a kingpin here. So I got mixed up with the church and the street, and I learned they work together, you know, pastors, pimps, and all of that stuff, you know. Telling you the truth. Oh, I'm a senior pastor for 30 years, okay? So I know how they work together. And the women, the cakes, and all of that, and I played it good till I went to come home and see my mother 3 years later, and I ran into one of my street runners. And he said, "You changed your life?" And I couldn't tell him that because, you know, I was the man. So I left, and driving home, I got home, and I said, I can help this guy. I bought him his first prostitute. I gave him his first gun to shoot. Surely he'll listen to me. I called home, and my brother said, "You didn't hear?" I said, "No, man, they was looking for you, man." I said, "Who, them cats, man?" So what happened? They shot him 7 times. Guess what? Outreach and support started. So I've been chasing Junior for 30 years. All of us have a passion, something that drives us. And the next question, I lined up for the next question. Do you need to be empathetic to work in this field of outreach and support? Anyone can answer that.
I know I believe in the concept of love. I believe you have to actually love to serve. I believe in servant leadership. And so, yes, you have to really do it well. Now, you can do it, but to do it well, you must. It is a must. We have to love what we do. It's an assignment for a lot of us. I've heard nothing but that since I've been here. You may not see it while you're going through college. You may not see it as a police officer, but it is an assignment and a purpose that ultimately God has for you that you will have to own up to if you're really going to serve in this population.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think that empathy is a critical tool. It really allows you to have what I call an MRI of the client, and I think that it also allows us, because again in this work we could easily get numb and desensitized and can kind of cluster everybody into groups. Empathy allows you to continue keeping a very person-centered approach to each individual, to each community, each family, whatever layer, whatever section you work in. To add to what, for myself, even in terms of the way I'm able to empathize, because I was in Street University, and so people hear you a minister. I was enrolled in Street University. I graduated Street University. Was facing life in prison for a body, and was given a second chance. And so when we say empathy, and maybe to really empathize on a very deep level with not only the offenders but the victims, and understanding the process of transformation. If you can't empathize, how can you really facilitate true transformation? How will you be? And transformation is facilitated in the context of authenticity and relationships. And so empathy is really that ability to really connect to the person's pain, to their angst, to their why. And so I'll leave it there to my colleague.
Okay.
So I'm a social worker, and I don't know if there are any other social workers here, but I don't think you become a social worker unless you have a lot of empathy. But it also speaks to the fact that I don't have a lot of shared experiences with the population that I'm working with. And if I didn't have the ability to hear their stories and understand their backgrounds and really have that kind of empathy, I think this work would be impossible for me to do.
You have to have empathy because they know, the victims know, the people in the neighborhood, everybody knows if you're real or you phony. So if you come and you start talking to somebody and they can tell whether or not you care about them. And that's how you get their attention. So in this game, this ain't one of those that you can put on a show for somebody. You have to actually have it inside you, and they can feel it. It's almost like a magnet that would draw you to them. So you have to have it.
And I'll make it unanimous. So I don't, if you try to do this work without empathy, you're not going to do it, and you're not going to be effective at it. That truly caring about a person and where they come from is the first thing that you have to be able to do.
And, you know, just to chime in at the end of that, I have a lot of people that want to help me, and, I'll take your help. It goes back to the old question, what's the most important part on a car? Is it the battery? Is it the ignition switch? Is it the little coil that connects? All of us have something to contribute to in outreach and support, but the empathetic person needs to be at the front line. Mm-hmm. Then you can have some people at the back that can provide finances and data and everything else. But in doing this work, you must have this train running properly. You can't put the caboose to the back. So don't feel left out. Like, man, I don't feel like that. Well, that's what we're for, is certain people to do certain jobs. With Miss Erika on the panel, I admire her job. I've never worked with people in trauma, at-risk people at trauma. She got to head on and deal with a lot of different issues. I'm straight in the street. So her part, all these parts fit together to make everything work. The next question I want to ask the panel is, we're going to get a little deeper now. Y'all ready for this? Okay. How important is finding a job for an at-risk person?
I'll start this one. Eventually it's going to be important. But it really, you got to take that person where they're at and where are they at. I'm a huge believer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so if that very basic structure, the physiological needs, are not being met, to ask them to learn and to adjust to work life is probably not going to happen. And so you've got to be able to meet their most basic needs, and then you can work at that. One of the things that we have at Goodwill is we actually have a work experience program. And so when folks come in, after we get those most basic needs met, they start going through the soft skills training, how to go to work, why to go to work, all those things. But then we give them a safe place to try it. And so they'll go to work in our store, in our processing center, in our industrial services division, and they actually, they get minimum wage, but they actually get to practice what they have learned. And while we operate on a point system, for our folks that are in this work experience, if you point out, it just means we're going to have you go back and review some things that were in the class that maybe didn't quite transition for you, and then you'll go back out. So we have some folks that go back and forth quite a bit, but it really gives them that opportunity to make mistakes in a safe environment before they take that next step out into the world of employment in the community. So
I'm waiting for you. Reverend, come on.
It's a vital importance for the youth to, priority is, first of all, much of their pain is coming from a lack of opportunity and poverty, generational poverty. So to be able to position them, our approach is to really do the healing work first. We've discovered that we're able to put youth into a variety of wonderful opportunities, but if you don't do the repair work, it's like pouring water into a bucket full of holes. And so the healing work precedes the opportunities, but again, because of the hunger, because of the poverty, because of the real-time needs, because you want to change their mindset, and again, job opportunities are transformative. It helps them, really it gives them a new identity, a new sense of purpose, a new motivation. And I think that once they experience the job place, it transforms them. And it's nothing more transformative than opportunity in terms of giving them a new mindset, giving them a new awareness of who they are. Many of the youth that we work with come from, failing in school, and so they don't have a successful track record. Many don't even have job histories or any work-related experiences. But with that being said, being able to earn a check is transformative. And so I think that we push them toward that. But as my colleague stated, in terms of the emphasis on soft skills, which is also tethered to trauma and just lack of experience, we found that by placing them in situations when someone is correcting them, sometimes that could be easily misinterpreted and forfeit opportunities. And so I would say that it's a paramount to really cultivate future economic opportunity for them. I mean, one of our things is not just job creation. We really focus on entrepreneurship and really understanding what a culture of commerce is about and how do we create ecosystems really to facilitate wealth creation because we understand that poverty is at the root of much of the violence that we see in our communities.
Well, I'm going to say, and I want you to come back when I'm finding with my group in gang violence, guys, that employment is not the top of the list for them. I'm finding out that I can get them a job. I have the ability through an assessment sheet to get a person a job in probably about an hour or maybe 4 the latest. I've forged some relationships with employers in Jacksonville where they can hire you if you fail a marijuana test, and they'll give you 30 days to get cleaned up. And I've had one client, he's had 4 jobs in like 2 weeks. Then I found out, as Pastor Winley said, that there's other needs that have to be met. I'm finding that some of these guys take about 5 months to get them to normality because there's a lot of damage in their psyche, and the needs that they have are at the top of their list. First of all, they haven't worked. Just so you know, now in this life, the man is not a white person. The man is a 9-to-5 job because they're used to slinging their own stuff. So the things that I'm finding that are at the top of the list now is I got child support issues. My baby mama trying to lock me up. I don't have a driver's license, man. Let me go a little further. I don't have a license, and I'm 30 years old. I've never had a license. Yeah. So if I get a job, you know, when you find these employers that do this short-term work or temp work, the first thing they say, do they have reliable transportation? Yep. Now, here's another thing most of us know, and I know it's police in here. Please don't arrest none of my people. They pull up and never have a driver's license, and they be in their car. And they fill out their paperwork, and they said, do you have a live driver's license? No. See you later, man. Thanks a lot. And they get right in the car, and you're like, okay, they driving, though. So those things like that, we got to take in consideration because heretofore we've always been told, just get them a job. Just get them a job. Well, maybe they ain't ready for a job. So you got to really take those things in consideration. Anybody want to say anything else?
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting question, and I've heard a lot of talk about the big, small things. So getting an ID and I'm sorry, big, small stuff, yes. But I think there is something to be said about getting, first of all, from my experience, especially with patients in the hospital, they all say they want a job. And whether they're ready to have a job or not, that's a different story. But that's the first thing that people will say is that they want a job. And if that's what it takes to get them in the door to start working with them, sure, we can help you with a resume. And so what I would do with clients is sit down with them, start doing a resume. And it might be the first time that somebody's asked them, you know, what skills do you have? What are you interested in? What do you think you'd be good at? What could a career path look like? And so even just opening up that conversation and asking those questions, I think can build a level of confidence where they at least know that that's in the future. And yeah, there might be 50 things to work on before we get there, but you know, it's somebody telling them this is where you can be. Now we need to think about the other steps to get there. But I think it should definitely be part of the conversation.
Let me just add to that. Everything that my colleagues said on this panel is true, but we also have to add to that is they have a child. You have to connect them and teach them how to be a father. Because once you become a father, then you know the importance of, well, this is what I'm going to do next. You got to have a reason to do and to make it. And a lot of times they come out and they want to get a job, and you may send them to get their GED, but they're still not quite that man. You have to connect. And that's one of the problems that we're having in the households today is there's no man in the household. So if we're working with somebody, we usually have them buy a gift for the child or something. If he missed a couple of birthdays, go in there and just bring it in the house. That man seeing his father that young child seeing his father for the first time, bringing a gift and giving a hug, everything else is going to flow.
Yeah, I would just add, when you a job is good, and like my colleague was saying in terms of, I think you begin to paint. It creates a window for them to really start to experience, have vision. Again, when you really have to understand that because of the oppression, because of the lack of exposure, that oftentimes the outlook is very limited. And so one of the things that we do, one of the curriculums that we have, it helps them to look at their non-job or even their experiences in the street, and how do you look at those as transferable skills? And more importantly, what does a career path look like? Because oftentimes you're not going to be able to get into your ideal career. You're going to have to take a number of jobs that is going to become a stepping ladder to that career. But helping them to kind of create that vision, it allows them to have, how would I say, the perseverance to endure the process as they are in this process of transformation and change. Does that make sense? And so, so again, the job is very critical, and we have to be very realistic in terms of the entry level jobs, and so that way, because most of them that's going to pretty much be what's available. But again, so that way they can understand that there's purpose in even what may seem menial.
Oh, let's go a little further in that for you guys. Say you find a guy and you get him a job. Okay, what I do, I have an assessment sheet first. Okay, and anybody that's ever went out with me, I have 2 rules: don't lie to me, don't trust me because I don't trust you. It's my 2 rules, and I don't break my rules. They say the same because it's a process. You got to build a trust, and then they fill out an assessment sheet, and my assessment sheet consists of 17 questions. And from my priority question, the first one: do you have child support issues? That's my first question, because whatever I get you, they're going to take your money if you have back child support. So we got to fix that first. Then it goes down to do you have a significant other? What I'm really saying in street terms is, do you have a baby mama? Because you can get him a job, and the baby mama make him do anything else he want to do. So once I find all of that down, I go down the line and I say, okay, this guy would work good as an outreach worker. If I can get this guy to help me reach other guys, okay? So this is the challenge that we're having with a lot, and I'm sure other people. You'll get a guy working for you. You found him a job, but now the participants that he's pulling in is getting paid more than him. How do you meet that? How would you guys suggest? Do we raise the pay? Do we lower the pay? Hey, that's just the way it is. Somebody talk to me about that.
Good question.
As a leader in this field, your job is to always develop people. Mm-hmm. And if they can't take care of their home, how can they help someone else take care of their homes?
Yes, sir.
And so at the same time, you should not be using these individuals for your long-term gain, but for the purpose of helping them to reach to their next level as well. And so that's a conversation we've had a lot while we've been here amongst our Detroit people, South Bend, Indiana, and some others, is that our obligation is not just to the guy on the street, it's to the other person who is providing that services. You want to see them grow, you want to see their families prosper, and so it has to be a street that has a lot of pathways for them to see their potential as well. And so that's is key, because once they feel valued, or more value, and a lot of times that's tied to money, then you'll see your engagement of the work that they do would take on a whole different shape.
Mm-hmm. Anybody? Well, please.
So one of the things about challenges that we've had at Goodwill is the fact that Goodwill has several different industries under one roof, and different industries have different pay scales. So how do you balance that not-for-profit and those pay scales and be competitive, and yet try to be competitive under one roof in different industries that aren't competitive, if that makes sense? So we are, when it comes to the industry, whichever one it is, for the most part, we are very competitive. And in the world of social services, we have worked to be competitive, and we're still making adjustments as we go. The other piece of that, though, then, too, is, as you talked about, it's training individuals. And so prior to being CEO, I was the vice president of workforce for 17 years. And so I did lose people occasionally because, you know what, they are out helping people find jobs. And depending upon the skill sets we've helped these individuals get, I mean, one of the things we do is CDL training. These guys are making $70,000, $80,000 right now. I can't pay that to entry-level individuals who are doing this work. I mean, it's reality. So, but what we do is we celebrate our folks as we continue to develop them. And when they have that opportunity, as much as we may hate to lose them, our job, whether they're coming through our door as a client or they're coming through our door as an employee, is to develop them to be the best individual that they can be. And so if we're that stepping stone to get them to that next level, then we've done our job. And so that's kind of how we approach it and continuously work on pay as the best we can, but then also training and development of the individual.
Okay, now, I learned this from Eric Cumberbatch yesterday. I am the advocate for the advocates, okay? I'm the street guy that came there. I deal with thousands of guys. And I start researching. You know, the average cost for a homicide is $125,000, okay, to get rid of that with law enforcement, overtime hours. If we're picking these guys to help stop violence and stop shooting, isn't that worth some kind of salary? When you actually confront a guy like this, you know, I'm not saying $70,000, something to take care of his family. A lot of the guys I work with, they say, hey, man, how much you paying me? Well, I'm paying you $15, $16. Hold on, brother. Hold on, brother. You want me to stop this? I can make that in 2 days out on the street. Where's some kind of incentive? We gotta weigh out which is more important. Do you want to stop the shooting? Do you want to stop the group and gang violence? Or, you know, yeah, you build people, but it has to be some kind of motivation. It has to be something, you know, in the streets, the main thing that's more important than anything is their family. They want to take care of it. They'll stand down when their family is there. And if they can't take care of the family, in most of these homes, the men are doing it on the streets, slinging, selling. Y'all want the real stuff? Okay, I'm just making sure because I'm getting ready to go in there now. And the brothers sitting up at the old lady's house because she got the food stamps, she got the EBT, and he can't get a job nowhere else. And if they find out he's there, all of them going to get put out. So if we take care of him, we'll stop a lot of that cycle stuff. So what Ms. Coble was saying, I understand that in the setting of the Goodwill and all of that, but I have an opportunity. I'm going to get in trouble now. Well, I'm working with the mayor and I'm working with the sheriff, and they're asking me, should we pay these guys more? And I'm going, yes, you should pay them more. You should pay them more. Look, they got their lives on the line. To change your life from out in the street, and now you coming with this, all of a sudden you got a stigma on you. What are you doing? Are you a CI? Are you an informant? Are you a snitch? They got to go back and forth out there. We want the right workers to do the job, but we want to mold the workers to be like us. You're not going to get it. I'm a different case. I've been doing this for a while. If you would have met me 10 years, 20 years ago, you probably would all ran out of here. But something changed inside of me. But now I got to continue to fight with them. Anybody want to get on there with that?
Yeah, I wanted to add. I know that when we first started doing the work, particularly focused around credible messengers, and this was in the context of Archer's Transformative Initiative, which was launched with Mayor Bloomberg, at that time Mayor Bloomberg and George Soros, the Young Men's Initiative. We were paying mentors part-time $15 an hour. Now this again was part-time. I'll say this. But one of the things that we felt was really needed even back then, and we alluded to it when we first started this panel, is that we wanted to make sure that everyone that was being involved was about mission and not just money, right? You know, so that's a key principle, mission over money. With that being said, $15 an hour, people working at McDonald's can make that money. 5 years, Urban Institute has done the evaluation. 68% of the participants did not reoffend. So now you have an evidence-based approach. Currently, right now, we're paying full-time credible messengers $50,000 a year, and that's the start. We've also built 2 institutions through partnerships with academia to start creating inroads for them to build themselves academically. One is the Credible Messenger Justice Center. That's in conjunction with the CUNY School of Graduate Research, where we have a certificate program where credible messengers can earn 20 credits and then also look at enrolling in college. And we also established what's called the Institute of Transformative Mentoring. That was in conjunction with the New School. And so, again, about developing, really being able to develop. We don't want to take away from what credible messengers are able to do. On my staff, I have individuals who are project coordinators, and they're still on parole. And so this is the work. And so we feel that being able to position credible messengers to be featured prominently as leaders in this work of community transformation and healing is essential and it's a must. And we need to make sure that we do not castrate them of their natural abilities to facilitate transformation in the process. So we want to tool them, but let them contextualize those tools to the skill sets that they already have, given their knowledge of the communities. They understand the narrative, they understand the trauma. When you think of a traditional credible messenger job description, these are people that are going to go places that most people not going to even think about stepping into. You know, and so, you know, these are neighborhoods that most people wouldn't even think about walking near. And they're going in there 24/7. They're available 24/7. They're putting their lives on the line because they have a debt to pay. They were once part of the process of destruction of the community, and now given this opportunity, they go forth with great zeal and energy, and they should be supported and lifted up. And so those are some efforts that we're looking at doing, exposing them to a lot of transformation, a lot of training. You have to even in terms of how you run your shop, there has to be a great level of cultural competency, because for me, it's the way I look at the work of community transformation, it's a triple bottom line. You have the youth, but the credible messengers are part of that work. These were all individuals who could be recidivists. And so these are former gang leaders that you are sustaining through their process of transformation, and it actually makes the work that they're doing with the young people that much more authentic, particularly in the context of entering job markets.
So at DCJS, from the very beginning of this program, it became clear that we really did not want to have part-time staff, because for a lot of the reasons we're talking about, that, you know, we were asking them to be available at all times in case of emergencies, but they were also only getting paid 20 hours a week. So we eliminated that part-time aspect of the program. And just to be clear, I think that most likely everyone in this room should be making more money as well, especially being here in New York City and so close to Wall Street, and we all know that what's going on. I think this is a problem across the board, and I would love to be able to pay our credible messengers more money. But I think that there are other things that need to be considered, and that includes health insurance, so good health insurance for them, for these people who are in dangerous situations, and, you know, very likely that they could get injured while they're working, or on their off hours, because the work blends into that time. So I think having health insurance that really, you know, takes that into account is vital. And then I think there's also a component of giving people life skills, learning how to budget, learning what other job opportunities they qualify for and what those salaries are, just to have a sense of, okay, if we lose this grant funding, what are my other options? Oh, maybe not that many. Maybe I do need to go to school right now, or start thinking about different trades, or just not, so that we don't get stuck in this bubble of just a credible messenger, and you know, help build our people up. And we do a lot of that with trainings, but I think it's an ongoing struggle. So I definitely think I would love to be able to pay them more, but I think we also have to think about, you know, the other components to that.
The package.
Package, yeah.
Total package. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one last thing. I think one of the things that we also do is we create a career ladder. You just mentioned, you know, it's not just about being a credible messenger. I'm an executive director. So it's not just the street outreach work. There's a whole cadre of opportunities: schools, principals, clinicians, social workers, community health, public health advocates, whatever arena. But again, the main thing is put the value on this work. You know, when we talk about group violence and individuals that are going out into the community, put value on that. They shouldn't be given the leftovers.
And also, I've learned a long time ago that you are your first client. If you're not getting paid for doing the job, if you're not going through trauma assessments, it's going to be a problem. It's going to trickle down. And we have a lot of workers here that's doing outreach and support work, but not being paid for their jobs properly.
Yes.
So we need to find out how to do that too. You know, we got to be mindful of these things, because some of these things that we're thinking about, we brought it up in one of the meetings earlier, in one of the panels. We didn't realize this earlier. Wait a minute, we got to go through trauma. We need a psychologist too. We need a psychiatrist. Yes. With some of the stuff that we see. We need a health plan to help us with stuff that we have to go through, and stress and high blood pressure. So we got to make sure we're taken care of. Otherwise, that will trickle down to your outreach, credible messengers, and all of that. So we need to find ways to do that to increase our pay too. Is anybody here agreeing with that? Amen. Clap on that. Let everybody know. Or stay broke. That's the truth. The next one I want to ask is, how important is influentials in high-risk areas? How important is the influentials, the family members, the friends, the homies, the girlfriends, in helping at-risk people?
Okay, I'll start with that. I think that's very important, because if you're working with their child, you can be the best role model. You can take them places, you can do different things, but he still have to come back to that house. That house that probably whatever's going inside is the reason why he's doing what he's doing. So at the same time, if you're not taking care of the family, and when I mean family, I'm going to just say like mothers, you know, because there's a lot of mothers who don't get the credit they should get because the father's not around. But we can't stop, or nor can we help how they're living or where they're living. But what we can do, if you're going to help them, you need to help the whole family, the mother as well. Because like I said, I can take someone at risk to Europe, but he's not my child, so I can't be with him 24/7. He's still got to come back home. And when he come back home, if his mother's hungry, if there's no heat in the house, or somebody's handing the mother a letter saying she's about to get evicted, all that goes out the door now. That Europe trip, everything going out the door. So it's very important that we actually have to keep in mind that we have to always help the family. One thing we're doing now in Bridgeport is we're actually going to the shooters, because Bridgeport's just that small. It's 143 people, but we know that in Bridgeport itself, it may be like 30 young men out there that are carrying guns and shooting, that's keeping all the killing going. So what we decided to do was, hey, instead of sitting back waiting for the cops to arrest them, or instead of getting back waiting till they get killed, let's go knock on their door. Let's go and talk to their mothers. Let's go and talk to them. So in the process of what we're doing right now, we had 7 homicides start right off the back in January. So we started going to the mothers and sitting down with the kids that we know are doing the shooting, and we haven't had a homicide, gun violence since. And all of a sudden, one of the young men who was doing a lot of the shooting, he really didn't want to. He wanted to change his ways. And so he had 5 guys that he know he can control, and he said, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell my guys to put the guns down, but you tell the other side of town to stop coming on our side of town. Right? And we decided to have him sign a peace treaty. Right? And we haven't signed it yet, but we're meeting with the mayor this Friday, and I think that's where it's going to happen at. And then we're going to try to give him all the outreach that he needs to try to help him stay away from the gun, as well as go over to the other side of town and start going to see their mothers. So right now in Bridgeport, there's only 3 of us, you know, and we've been fighting for the longest because, as he said earlier, we worked 6 months without getting paid because they wouldn't give us a budget. You know, they didn't believe in Project Longevity. So me and my partner back there, Garland, literally was going in our pockets to try to pay to keep this program going, because we already knew if this program goes, there was going to be more homicides. And all we had to do was wait until, because it was like the state didn't sign the budget. So that was the problem. And we just had to hang on. For 6 months, we went without getting paid, nor did we get the back pay for doing this. Mm. But the important thing is we helped save lives.
That's the key.
And that was more important than getting paid. Mm-hmm.
around our table, we call them influencers, and there's no greater influence than baby mama. And so right away, we start engaging, trying to find out background, who's in the background. And we're blessed to have a mayor that did an extensive study on who are the influencers. And so we narrowed it down to within a couple of zip codes, 1,500 people that are likely to commit crimes, but another 25 that are likely to cause and be associated to that. And so the influencers are who really they're doing the crime for. Most of these guys don't care anything about their lives. We know that now. But you let them talk about the influences and family, that's who they're living to impress, to do for, and whatever. And so those are the people that you need to bring to the table with them sitting there as well and let them speak on your behalf to try to disrupt what's going on. A lot of times the influencers don't know the full story. They only know that they think they're protecting it. They don't know sometimes they're the perpetrators as well. And so those are the key people that really can help control the violence in that cycle.
You know, I had an incident when Mr. Bennett said we went to a door once, and we've had the same analysis done, so we know we don't go to your door by accidents. Our guys are most likely to kill or most likely to be killed. If we knocking on that door, we know exactly who you are. And we knocked on the door about 2.5 years ago. This guy that's supposed to retaliate, and his mom came to the door, innocent, nice, kind, sweet. And we said, we think you may, you know, going to go out and kill. I'm not going to kill nobody. So he said, well, we have evidence. You had gun charges, this and that. And in the middle of the conversation, he said, I told him to stand down. See, last week we was going to get that other, and I realized, I said, oh, hold on, it's not him. It's not him. That's the shot caller right there. So a lot of times we go after the main guy, and we forget the influentials or the ones that they're close to. As Mr. Bennett said, it's clear. And I had another incident where I was out in the street helping somebody, and somebody came to jump me. About 3 or 4 guys came out. Then some other guys, rougher, uglier, tatted up, wife beaters on. They came. I said, I'm going to die right here in the streets. They beat up the other guys, told him, get away from him. He gave my mama food when I was locked up. I didn't even know who they were. So you got to look at the importance of helping those influentials, baby mamas, cousins, daddy, big mama, grandma, all of those people. When you want to get to the and then what we do, another thing, we leave a letter at the house. If we come there and the mama get the letter, they're going to call real fast. And they might have a lump on their eye or something, and they're going to get them to call. So you got to see how important. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just to piggyback on that, and Quincy is in the audience, we had about 3 or 4 key gang leaders. I mean, these are notorious gang leaders. Think they're tough. And so on the phone, I mean, in my office talking to them before, I've said, who is your baby's mama? And they blame everything on baby's mamas. I said, well, call her. And they don't like to call her. I said, call her. And so she's on the phone. You can hear in the background, who is Mr. Bennett? What do you want to talk about? So you got to calm her down first. You got to calm her down because a lot of them wanted to back out of the gang activity. But baby's mama said, you got to get my hair done, you got to get my nails done, right. I ain't going to pay this rent. He can't do that. You got to bring them in and show them another way of life, possibly get them to working, get some training, and get them into programming.
Yeah, total wraparound. Yeah. You hit the whole family. You know, we have to really define what outreach and support is. You know, many years ago I worked in the White House administration. And we had a meeting one day with the Black Caucus, and we had to define what is prison ministry. And we came up with all of these ideas, and we realized we were all chasing rabbits. We didn't know exactly what it was. And when you nail down what outreach and support is, or support and outreach is, and the big little things, because a lot of times, and you have to find out in your area. That's why I love these meetings with all my colleagues, because I can hear what's happening in Harlem and South Bend, in Chicago, in Bridgeport. And when we realize that no one person has the answers. You know, years ago, I was working back in '94 with the LA gangs, and my daughter was like 5, and she was playing a Monopoly game. And she said, Dad, I'm going to win this. I said, I'm not going to win. You're not going to win it. The next, she said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to LA. She said, there's not enough crack addicts in New York. And I said, no, I got to go to L.A. She said, why? I said, you see that Monopoly game you're playing? She said, yeah. I said, you'll never win. She said, why? I said, McDonald's is too wise to put all the pieces in the same region. I said, we got to always understand, if you want to know something, you got to reach outside and see what's going on. Always remember, use the same tire, just change the rims, and it'll work. So the next thing I want to approach with the panel is, how important is working with at-risk, the population in hospitals in trauma situations? So Erika, you might can jump in here first, because you're the hospital lady. And
I made him include this question in the...
yes, you did. I did it. So you owe me $15.
So I think that, the topic here is meeting people where they're at. And I think if we ignore the hospital from that, we're sort of missing a huge part of meeting people where they're at. Because as we know, many people who are at high risk for being involved in violence end up in the hospital. So what better place to engage them and meet them, literally, at the hospital where they're at. So, of course, where they're at means many different things, but we need to start at the hospital. And I just think it's very important to have an immediate response in place, a protocol that hospitals have to deal with these situations. And if you go to any hospital, they have protocols for sexual assault, for domestic violence, for child abuse, and there are protocols in place, and they've, it's been part of the institution for years. But then you go to hospitals and ask about, what about the 18-year-old kid who was shot on the street corner, and the answer is, well, he won't talk to anyone. That's what everybody, how all of the medical staff feel for the most part is, well, they don't want to talk to us. They told us to get out of the room, or they told us they were just sitting on the stoop and minding their own business when this happened. That's the big. You should hear the surgeons that it's a joke. It's oh yeah, this one was just sitting on the stoop, minding their own business, ha ha ha, the usual. And it's not a funny joke. It's terrible. And the hospitals really need to do more to create services that address these issues specifically. And my previous role before I started working for DCJS was working at a hospital in the Bronx. And while I was there for 5 years, I saw over 500 patients who came in who had been shot, stabbed, assaulted. And it became very clear that whatever was in place, there were social workers who see all the patients who come in, but with this population, it always was no more than a 5-minute interview because there was a lot of resistance. That just, it wasn't working. So the hospital really embraced this outreach model and hired one of our SNUG sites. This is one of 11 of the New York State SNUG sites to be based in the hospital, which was amazing and really allowed us to not only access the patients in the hospital, but really implement the strengths and abilities of the outreach workers to do the work that most of the medical providers were having a really tough time with. So as a social worker, I would walk in with one of the outreach workers, and immediately you could see that this person, saw somebody that they might know them, they might know their cousin, but they know they live in the neighborhood, they're speaking the same language. There's just a guard is let down. And it's incredibly important for patient care, that they have somebody in the hospital they can feel comfortable with. And it also allowed us to get a lot more information about what happened to the, extent that maybe it wasn't a safe discharge. Maybe this person really shouldn't be sent back home. And we needed to really think about, do we have a family member that lives in another state, or can we get this person out of this area for a certain period of time? But if it was only me asking questions, no, I'm safe, I'm fine, I don't need to talk to you, that would be the extent of the conversation. So really having these outreach workers and these credible messengers work with the hospital team to respond to these incidents is crucial for patient safety, for patient care, and just the ongoing relationship that it creates. So once somebody is discharged from the hospital, they would stay connected with our outreach workers, and that would increase the rates of them coming to their follow-up appointments. You'd be amazed that somebody, was shot 8 times and doesn't, discharged from the hospital, maybe with some equipment, crutches, maybe some gauze for their wounds, but then we never see them again. So that's like common occurrence. But if they create a relationship with one of these outreach workers who can call them or remind them of the appointment, maybe bring them to the appointment, but just feel more comfortable in the hospital and feel like the services are really designed for them and to support them, it is a win-win for everyone. And it was really amazing to watch in the hospital. There was, people were skeptical at first, but this group, the outreach workers, have everyone in the hospital is familiar with them. Everyone in the hospital, is constantly calling them to get them up on the floors. If there's a family who's, getting upset about something, where's the SNUG team? Can they come up here? And we have a full security staff too, but the security staff is not prepared to handle things the way that the outreach team is. So they've become really an integral part of the hospital and the hospital community. And as part of this new rollout that we have between Office of Victim Services and DCJS, we're going to be working at a lot of the trauma centers in New York State and trying to implement this model.
Well, Reverend Winley, tell us how it's done, because you come into Jacksonville.
Well, I would say you want me to speak just about the hospitals, or just
Speak whatever's on your heart.
okay,
Yeah.
I'll just add in terms of the hospitals, like you said, just that cultural concept. I would say this, that the crisis is really the greatest opportunity. And so when you're in the heat of that pain, when there's been a loss of life or a gunshot victim, that's really a tremendous opportunity to connect. The greatest way to connect is, again, we talked about empathy, that accompaniment, listening, providing those supports. Recently we just lost a young man, 15 years old, shot in his head. He really wasn't into that life. Many of the young people that was with him, eyewitnesses, and we just converged, right? And so there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot going on, but you just have to be there. Again, in the crisis, in the pain, you have to really show that presence and be consistent. And again, this is the nature of the work. I mean, this is where it goes beyond just convention and traditional doctor's hours. When you get in those calls and have to talk young people off of the ledge because they're thinking about, they might have heard something and now they're thinking about what they want to go and do, and now you got to really go and talk them off of that ledge. I think that, again, when communities are in pain and when families are in pain, again, presence, that empathy, just being with them, I find that that's a great service. I think a lot of times it's taken for granted. You're not thinking straight. You mentioned about hospital. Hospital could be a very intimidating environment for people. Doctors are coming at you. They're coming at you trying to collect insurance. You're in pain. Your family's upset. And so, they're trying to do their job. And so to have individuals that can facilitate and be a buffer in those situations, it's a great service. It's a great service. It's a great opportunity to connect authentically to the needs. Again, our work, when you talk about outreach, it should always be needs driven. We always will come, with what we think we could do, tune into the needs, get the pulse of what's needed at that time, and be willing to serve. That to me is paramount. When communities are in pain, when they're lamenting, cry with them, get involved. Don't be willing to get into it, and be present with them while they're suffering. I think that that builds your credibility. You know, we already talked about just having that family-focused approach, and so, you know, we really tried to do our best to rally resources around the family during that time, assess those needs that are triggering the traumas, and try to, wherever best, if you can't provide it, then try to connect them to the resources that have. It's not about you trying to be the one shop only, but you can always, you might know someone that you can connect vital resources to them. I think that, again, gun trauma, violence, particularly in that setting, I think, again, it's a unique opportunity to really connect and to really show empathy, to show love, and they won't forget it. You know, I mean, I've had the unfortunate task of doing a lot of eulogies and you know, presiding over, and the families don't forget. They come, you know, they come to you, you know, it builds credibility. They know the community don't forget. The words that you speak, you know, the little things that those actions in that time are heightened and augmented during that time because the need is so great. And so anytime there's those type of, you know, get out there, respond, you know, it could be a phone call, listening, you know, letting them vent, and being non-judgmental, you know, because it's not always, sometimes, you know, letting them verbalize their violence is better than them going out there and acting it out. And so just be willing to get into the trenches with them when those situations happen.
Okay, I'm going to close out with this last statement, and then we're going to prepare for questions. Just some one-on-one outreach. Be a slow listener. Be a slow listener. That's the first thing. Don't overtalk your client. Let them tell you what's going on. They will tell you. They will tell you. Listen very, very slowly. Number two, don't make no promises that you cannot keep. A lot of times we get excited and we blurt out something, and now you got to pay the piper because now you're credible. You're not credible anymore. You blew it. Next one, finally, I'm going to give you, go out and research what is the support and outreach in your community. We have no excuse not knowing who's around us, what we do, since we have computers. Google, get out, go visit the people, go visit your partners. You don't have, I hate to say when we say we have common goals, because when you have common goals, you have enemies and competitiveness. When you have a common enemy, and it's violent crimes, we all work together and get it done. It's just a little side one. I never turn anybody away. If I'm finished with them, I refer them to somebody else. Okay? If I'm finished and I had enough of you, you're not listening to me, all parents should know that. When your kids stop listening to you, maybe you're listening to him, because you're not listening to me. So now we're going to open it up for questions to the panel. We on time? We doing good?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Jay Gilmer from Pittsburgh. Do any of you utilize support groups in any of your work?
We have peer-to-peer, and that has been, I think for me that was, when we started it, it's been really good, and I got to attend one and listen to the guys and how they shared their own struggles as they felt very comfortable with this group. And we were doing it every other week, and these guys asked for it to be done weekly because it has developed a real good support for the system for each other, and watching them hold each other accountable and asking the questions that we would have been asking them individually. Now they're asking each other's. I'm trying to figure out how to do it for our other programs besides just this work. So it's pretty loose. We have a facilitator that will get it started, but really then the guys run it. So.
In our programs, we use what we call transformative mentoring. It's an evidence-based approach. There's a curriculum attached to it called forward thinking. Again, we contextualize it. And so youth will meet twice a week or even up to 3 times a week. We've actually done gender-specific groups as well. But again, it's all based in this whole transformative mentoring approach, using motivational interviewing, cognitive restructuring, a lot of questions. We've even we have a group that we call Let It Flow, Let It Go, which is our contextualization of narrative therapy. where individuals are really sharing their stories, their pain, and how they're coping. And again, we're experiencing this together. And so, yeah, we use a number of tools and techniques. Group is at the core of what we do. Again, that's the healing work. And then we do all of the empowerment and activism, educational components that stems from the groups where the healing takes place. And so, yeah, and meals is also a part, an integral part of the group. Not just snacks. I'm talking about a hot food, hot meal. We sit down together, and that really builds that solidarity and that sense of belonging and family.
Historically, we have we had two groups. We had everything we do with my program, and I serve the largest amount of returning citizens to Detroit and Wayne County and probationers under Department of Correction and Courts. So everything we do is gender specific. So our women's support group was called Beyond the Tears, and so they met individually. Our men's group, we started a group called the Intimate Men's Roundtable Dinner Discussion, again, using a full-course meal and inviting the community in as well. So our oldest participant generally was about 93 years of age, wow, and the youngest was 8. And we put a series of 6 microphones around the room, and we would have a specific topic to talk. It was important that these young men heard a universal voice or thread from elders and young people that they could connect to, and then the relationships they developed in that large group. And it grew to 400 people. So my organization was like, how do we financially keep doing this? And that's what really kind of put a damper on everything. But it was 4-course meal. Everything we do is in cohorts, and then we do the one-on-one engagement in a smaller group as an offshoot. But everything is peer-to-peer support and engagement. And then our groups take on a fraternity. They all go by the number group they're in. And so when they see each other in town, they talk about what class they were in, and that's their support group.
Hi, I'm Cheryl from the mayor's office in Washington, D.C. I heard you talk about the connection with the victim services side in New York, and I apologize if you went into detail. I had to step out for a call, but can you share a little bit more about what that connection is?
So, New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services has had these SNUG programs in the way that they are now since 2014, and recently partnered with the New York State Office of Victim Services to implement a social work expansion to all of the SNUG outreach sites. So there are 11 throughout the state. So we're going to be hiring social workers and case managers at each of the 11 SNUG sites, and those clinicians, the social workers, are going to be working with the staff and with the participants that the outreach workers work with on a daily basis. And they will definitely be doing things like support groups for both staff and for participants, just because there's a huge amount of trauma.
Just one more follow-up. And did they use VOCA funding to do that?
Yes.
They did?
Yes.
My question is directed to the officer.
Yes, retired.
Retired. Okay. But during that time, you talked a lot about, it seems like you really have a true, genuine concern and care even while you were serving. I wondered, how did you handle being a part of a police department, having that much care and concern where you were looking to change the narrative of how policing is done, and not getting the support necessarily from your department or what that, how did you handle that, or what were some things that you did to maybe even change that?
Okay, well, one of the things I did was brought back information to my community. Because, see, I was raised and born in Bridgeport. And like I said, I played football, basketball. Everybody knew me. They just didn't like, because you know how we don't really connect with the police, and neither did I. I didn't like the police. But when my father, who was in my life, told me, if you're not at the table, you become part of the menu, I kind of knew that I had to do something to bring information back and share it, because information don't get out in the community. And sometimes the community have one way of thinking, and the police have another way of thinking. And so for me to ever talk for a police officer or be able to say, well, this is how it is, I had to be part of that. And at the same time, I had a chance to save some lives and meet some good people. So I took it upon myself. When they talk about community policing work, it does. Because I was in every store. I knew everybody, where they live at, who's their child. In fact, some of the mothers I'm working with now are the little kids I used to talk to that's on the street. And that's how I was able to get their sons to come in and say, look, I'll put my guns down. So all I'm doing is using a resource that I already had when I was an officer. And when I retired, I actually went to Florida, and I got called back because this job position opened, and the community asked for me. Mm-hmm.
So, and just a quick follow-up. So that's great as far as the community. Is that how you handle the police support or lack thereof?
Okay.
I'm sure your partners and people, you had people that agreed with you, you had officers that didn't agree with you.
Of course.
How did you manage
That's a whole story within itself. You know? Because like I said, you're dealing with the community don't like the police, and then you came in and you found racism within the police department. So now, where did I actually stand at? You know, and it was hard. You know, it's not easy, but I knew who I was as a person. And I knew what my goals was and where I was going. And so that's why I just kept going straight. Now, I also was vice president of the Guardians, and that's an organization to fight against the rights of the community. So, I had a strong voice, and I always connected with the people I knew I had to connect with, like the politicians, like the mayors, anybody who I know that we can get doors open. Because of that, we started a pop-up market, because in the same area I'm telling you about, Stratford Avenue, there's no grocery store, there's no library, there's nothing there. But to start up a pop-up market, we had to get everybody on board. And I had to have the chief of police to do his part, the mayor to do their part. So because I was at the table, I had some say, and I had people to listen. Had I never was at the table, we wouldn't have a pop-up market today. And it's because right now in Bridgeport, people are traveling to another town just to go grocery shopping, So, our kids are eating potato chips and popcorn and little fast food and all. We got to stop that. That's not healthy. We can't expect our kids to compete if they're not even eating right. So the pop-up market is all about eating right.
Bishop Harris, also for anybody that's in a position like my friend here that was a police officer, there is always another outreach and support, and it's a bridge that most people don't realize. Remember, I was in gangs for a long time. How do you think they treated me when the guy that's known as Switzerland in the city of Jacksonville, in the worst area, all of a sudden is employed by the sheriff's office? That's a big thing. Is he a snitch? He's an informant. And so bridges, you got to remember, if you're in this line of work, bridges get walked on, spit on, people jump off of them, but you got to stand strong until you bridge the gap. Now they come to me and tell me everything, and I found out that all law enforcement is not bad, all thugs are not bad, and I'm the one that's able to bridge the gap, because we have a couple of law enforcement officers that want to work as outreach and supports. And a lot of times we get a lot of flack, especially when people put out that perception, oh, they was a cop. What are they going to do? Well, they were humans first. They were people first. He said it well yesterday. I was a man that put on a uniform, but my heart is still for the community. And you just heard his story. He trumped all of us. He got shot at, and the community protected him. So we got to look at that. So as you got outreach support, you got big little things, then you got people that are bridges that's got to stay there and weather it so we can put this together. You had another question somewhere. I think this gentleman was first here. Yeah. I got that street vision, I can see stuff happening.
Paul Soglin, Madison, Wisconsin. In working with the opioid crisis, one of the things we're finding is the research is showing that if we get to the patient within 12 to 24 hours of an overdose, there's a greater chance that they're going to participate in rehabilitation, particularly if it's with someone who's a counselor who's already gone through rehab. I'm just curious if any of you are finding any strategies working with the victims of assault, the assailants, the witnesses, their associates, in regards to that first critical 12 to 24 hours in being effective, starting the discussion. Now, we don't expect it to happen immediately.
So when I hear stories that Isaac is hanging out with the Latin Kings after one of their members got shot, scared me a little bit, I'll be honest with you. But, you know, we were credited, Isaac was credited for stopping retaliatory shooting because of that. And so that's definitely a very important part of it. It's both sides. It's the victim that has the family and those associated that have been victimized, but it's also the other side of it too. And how do you balance that out, making sure that outreach is there for both sides of it? And so there is a reach. There was a recent shooting, and the outreach team was there for 6 hours afterwards, just talking and being there with the folks that were a part of that. But then also too, reaching out to the side where that was on the other side of it to ensure that nothing else happened, and get those things calmed down and get the information that is needed for those kinds of things. It's very important. So,
and at the hospital, I mean, that's the whole idea, is this golden hour when somebody just comes in and is extremely vulnerable, and, you know, their family is scared, and they are doing, you know, the way that they're thinking is, how do we keep this from happening again? And that's the perfect time to engage them.
The gentleman with the good hair. Look who it's coming from.
Thanks. I'm Mike McLively. I'm from Giffords Law Center, and part of what we're trying to do is find more public resources for this exact type of work, and that was an important part of this conversation earlier. So I wanted to ask whoever wants to take this question, in terms of state funding for this work, are you receiving any? I know, for example, with the SNUG program, New York State is paying for some of this work, and I think that's great. My understanding is that states like Florida, Indiana, Michigan, probably not, but I'd love to hear specifically from you, are they doing that? And one last point to make is Florida, a couple years ago after Parkland, found $400 million to invest in school safety, which was a whole other conversation to have, but I think totally missed the mark in terms of where do those resources need to go. So there's a sort of fake myth of scarcity of resources, and yet when privileged communities are impacted, suddenly we have hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think we need to change that, and I'd love to hear more about what this looks like in your states.
Well, let me say this, and I'll let you talk, Mr. Bennett. With Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, per se, I was doing this work already, and the sheriff came to New York City before he was the active sheriff and investigated National Network for Safe Communities. Before he was the sheriff, he asked me to come here and tell me what I thought about it. So he created another unit in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office that funded it. He created a separate unit from homicide. I'm under investigations. And then at the end of investigations is Jacksonville Violent Reduction Strategy. Then when the next program came, they lobbied with the city council to get the money. And so it happened, I was with the chief of staff at a meeting, and he asked me, Garland, is this needed? So the money is there. You got to get to the right people and get the right person in charge. And it takes work. And the reason I say this, remember I told you earlier, I worked for George W. Bush for 5 years in the White House as the Article HR 7 Faith-Based Initiative person for reintegration. And my job was to find faith-based organizations to receive the Capital Compassionate Grant. It was an intermediary grant. We did 600 applications. No one could pass it because no one had ever answered an RFP before that's doing this work. We're gifted in reaching the community, but when it comes down to their criterias, we have nobody to set it up and establish everything. Man, I done helped hundreds of people. Well, where's your data? Where's your stuff? So once you get that in line, then you can go out and lobby. That's how we did it. Mr. Bennett wants to say something, then I'll pass it after Mr. Bennett.
As far as Michigan, it depends on who's sitting in the governor's chair. It depends on both houses of legislation. We had, at one point in time with reentry, 128 community organizations that receive state funding to welcome these guys home. We had the largest, I think the second largest outside of California prison population. It was the #1 line item budget in our state budget. And the governor came in about 8 years ago and took all of those resources back and put them inside the prison. We're the last standing person. And so 6 years ago, I designed a prison diversionary program. It's the only one in the state of Michigan, focused in Detroit and Wayne County. We've been targeted ever since we designed that program. Now, here's the catch. $37,000 per year to house an inmate. I showed the governor where I could save them $7.5 million if they give me $1.5. And they're still targeting us. We're fighting now to try to save that money because they really want that money to flow through the state corrections. They do not want it in the community. They do not believe in our services. And so we're fighting that as we speak right now. The other agencies wonder how we're still standing. And I always refer to the person upstairs. Only God knows, and that's who knows why we're still standing. But we don't get the support from state governments. Most of ours is private.
I had a question, and it's kind of like what you just answered. But I want to know, how do you really feel about the money that they don't pay us to do the work that we do? They put low value on the work because they put low value on the people at risk. They put low value on the neighborhood, so they don't pay us well for the work that we do. And then if you need to feed your family, just like the people you getting jobs for need to feed their family. And how do you continue to take care of the community and then people don't want to take care of you? The jobs that we have, it's like the chicken and the egg. Mm-hmm. It's always there. So they look at us like, take our kindness for a weakness. Mm-hmm. Or because we feel that God we was brought in this world to do this job. Mm-hmm. And then they don't want to pay you. And I want to know how you really feel, because that's the issue that we need to deal with.
I feel, and I speak for my entire agency, we feel used. And I tell the people I serve, I'm doing a lot of tap dancing for you that I would not do for myself. I'm not used to begging for anything at any time. They won't pay for solutions. Understand, everybody in this room, they're not going to pay for solutions. They want the problems to keep perpetuating themselves because that's where the money is. They're not going to put the money in the communities because we have the solutions. We have the solutions. And so we're going to have to change that narrative. They do not pay. My program has outstanding, we have single-digit recidivism rates serving the largest number of returning citizens for 17 years. Fighting every day. And I told them I refuse. It's like working for food, but you're going plate to plate. I'm tired of that. Yeah, it's tiresome.
Of course, angry, feel disrespected, and feel like they don't care. That's the main thing. But we got to fight, and we got to continue to fight. And this is why we are just not dealing with our mayor. We're dealing with our senator, our representative. We're dealing with Moms Demand Action. We're dealing with Connecticut Against Gun Violence. We're dealing, everybody's on board. And it's working because for the 3 cities, Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport, they was only giving us $500,000. Mm-hmm. We fought, and we fought, and we fought. And Mike back there also fought with us. And we got $1 million this year, you know, so it's a start. So we're going to, for 3 cities. It's still not a lot, but it's a start. And all this comes from, you can't give up. You have to continue to fight. You got to build your base around you. Don't let them win. Don't let them win, because the minute you let them win, everybody in this room, do you realize how many people are needing you? How many people depend on you? Just think if all these programs go away, then what? So you carry a big, heavy load. So when you're fighting, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everybody. And that's why this is so important. And that's why it's important that we're here today and we're all talking, because I'm going to be bouncing things off of everybody here. How do you do this? Because the fight is not going to ever stop until I actually say, well, that's it. I'm retiring for good. But right now, the fight is on forever. And it's all about saving lives. And that's what everybody in this room doing. Anyone could come and sit in this chair because everybody's doing it that's out there. And everybody care. And if you didn't care, you wouldn't be sitting here for no hour and a half listening to us talk.
Okay, that's about it for the questions. I'm going to lead with this last statement about what he said. Like I said, I've been doing it a long time, and I got frustrated, I got angry, and I tried to quit. But when you're wired, like around 11:30, 12, you get up and go make another phone call. But because of my faithfulness, someone bought me a building, 29,000 square foot building. And the Jaguars furnished it. And since that, everything started flowing. Because I always say faithfulness is God finding you where he left you. If you're wired to do it, do it. My final statement I want you to know, I'm noticing for a long time, and my brother is deceased now. He told me this years ago, that when we go out in these neighborhoods, they're not bad neighborhoods. There's only a small percentage of the people driving most of the violent crimes. And keep this in mind. He said this to me so clearly before he passed. Garland, when they took the neighbor, okay, out of hood, it became a hood. Put the neighborhood back in it, and everything start changing. God bless you, and thank you all for your time.